Coming to you from the Hudson Media Group studio, this is Talking Politics, and I am New Jersey's premier journalist and top 100 Latino via the Latino Spirit Online magazine, Fernando Uribe. Hope you all had a wonderful start to the month of June. There is a lot to discuss, so let's get started. Here's what I'm thinking about right now. And folks, I've talked about it on multiple occasions on this show, and here's just one more. I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of the woke culture taking over almost everything here in modern society. And let me just sort of preface this by saying this week I made some appearances on other media programs statewide. And of course, many of the hosts call me because they know that I'm such a culture warrior. And of course, want to get my opinion on a variety of different topics. So we started talking about sort of wokeness and how it's sort of, encompassed our public schools, pop culture, anything, even within media. It's all about who can be more woke today than yesterday, or who can be more woke tomorrow. And we started talking about some topics that, they knew would resonate with me. And, obviously we started talking about, for example, iconic movie figures, right? So we talked about, for example, a guy that I've admired a lot just because I've read tons of the Ian Fleming books. And let me just preface this by saying that, during my undergraduate days at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, I almost triple majored, by having English as a third major in addition to sociology and criminal justice. And I read a lot of books during those years taking English courses. And one of my favorite authors was indeed Ian Fleming. And as you all know, Ian Fleming is the iconic author of all the James Bond books, and of course, which most of them, if not all of them, were transitioned into movies. And one of the things I love about James Bond, again, being sort of like the, alcohol drinking whoremonger, and bachelor. And these are all qualities I think that a lot of us can admire. A lot of qualities I think I've tried to embody in my lifetime too. But I've always appreciated James Bond. I've always appreciated sort of the novelty of what is James Bond. And while, we can sort of, maybe talk about demographics and the idea of now maybe, again, still keeping it a British character, a British male, maybe instead of a white male, maybe convert it to a black male, right? We were seeing some demographics in England, right, where we're seeing much more mass migration out of Africa, and we're seeing more men of color growing up in Great Britain. And that's one thing, and I can appreciate that. But this idea that we're talking about, or discussions about, let's try to change the novelty of James Bond. Let's make James Bond a woman, or let's make James Bond gay, or let's make James Bond transgender. That's not what James Bond is, folks. Okay, it's an iconic character. Now I get it, it's June, it's Pride Month, corporations and everyone wants to be woke, and you want to pander to the alphabet army. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like the LGBTQ plus A, whatever consonant you want to think about this month and add to it. I mean, that's sort of it seems to be that's a fixation now, right? Sort of acquiescing to woke culture, right? But folks, again, and while we can sort of look back to the authenticity of the character in books, you know what? It's about what we've seen in movies for almost half a century, right? The character of James Bond, again, tall, dark, handsome, straight man, obviously, that, charms the ladies, goes out and wears awesome suits, and is just cool, calm, and collected, okay? And that's the character I think that we should want to keep. The idea of wanting to, change him into a gay man or make him a woman, it's not Jane Bond, it's James Bond. Okay, and that's sort of like the insanity that woke culture is perpetuating today, right? Or for example, how would you feel, especially to all my black viewers out there, John Shaft, an amazing iconic character. If you ever watched the sitcom and the TV series during the 70s and early 80s, John Shaft was an amazing character, right? It's been played by two very different actors, and it was great. It was a tough guy. It was a black male. And you know what? Would you like it if we just started changing John Shaft to, an Italian guy from Staten Island? Would you like that? Yeah, I'll bet you anything. There are a lot of people in the black community, a lot of people in Hollywood, especially liberal Hollywood, would flip out. How dare you change someone like John Shaft? It's the same thing with James Bond, folks, and the same thing with this sort of fixation on woke culture and having to change iconic characters. Case in point. This week I was talking about on other shows. I'm a big comic book fan, and I understand that, for example, on the MCU and obviously on Disney Plus, we're seeing now the premiere of Loki. And as we all know, Loki is an iconic character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as he is Thor's brother, right? And of course, obviously I got some context about sort of a discussion about maybe Loki's now gender fluidity, which has been discussed, right, in the comics. So for example, I was able to do some homework on this, and it's, quote, however, in 2014's Original Sin, Volume 1, Number 2 comic, Loki's gender fluidity was spoken to directly according to the inverse. When Loki and Thor arrive to a female-run society, Thor tells Loki that these are fair matings, to which Loki responds, "So am I sometimes." Loki later takes on the form of a female in that issue and is referred to with she and her pronouns. So Inverse notes that in the same arc, Loki and Thor's father, Odin, says to his children, "My son, my daughter, and my child," who is both, which is another reference to Loki's gender fluidity. As for whether or not the gender fluidity of Hiddleston's character, Loki, in the MCU show on Disney Plus will be addressed so directly remains to be seen. Well, folks, again, and my issue with this is, listen, this does not make me a homophobe. It does not make me a bigot or a transphobe or anything else that people want to say, applies to this criticism. Okay, but aside from the comic itself, what we've been watching in movies for quite some time, I think is pretty obvious. Okay, Loki, for all intents and purposes, is, just like Thor is the god of thunder, right? Well, Loki's the god of mischief. He doesn't call himself the goddess of mischief. He's the god of mischief. Okay? Now, whether or not this is semantics on some people's part, that's fine. We can have that discussion. But I'm not into semantics, folks. I'm into the eye test. I'm into what we have been looking at visually for some time. Because by that same premise, then if you've also watched the MCU, then you've watched the X-Men movies during the early to mid-2000s. If you all remember, right, Mystique, the character played by Rebecca Romijn, totally hot chick, and then of course played by Jennifer Lawrence in the First Class reboots, another hot chick. Well, guess what? They're women. Okay? Yeah, they can shapeshift just like Loki apparently can, right? As it's been alluded to in the comics and obviously also in the MCU movies. But at the end of the day, Mystique is a woman. Okay? If I go up to Loki, and let's suspend disbelief for a second, folks. If I go up to Loki and kick him right between the legs, guess what's going to happen? He's going to feel it. Okay? If I go kick Mystique in between the legs, well, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to have the same effect on Mystique as it will on Loki. And I don't want to bore you with comic book lore, folks, but the reality is that now this fixation on being woke, this fixation on let's just pander by corporations to everyday society because, you know what, it's going to make money, it's going to make us seem all-inclusive and so hip and so, everything's so wonderful with rainbows and unicorns and the utopian ivory towers will be full of people rejoicing. Folks, I'm not into that stuff. I'm not into this nonsense. I'm into the eye test. I'm into let's just keep certain characters the way they are. That doesn't make me a homophobe. It doesn't make me a transphobe. It doesn't make me a bigot or, prejudiced against gay people or trans people or lesbians or whatever. Folks, it just makes me someone that's tired of the wokeness, that's tired of having to pander to all this insanity, right? We're seeing sort of the damaging effect of wokeness every day, whether it's in our public schools, whether it's trying to introduce LGBT curriculum as young as 5-year-olds, for God's sakes. There's no reason why 5-year-olds should be learning about anything about LGBT. Do you remember when you were 5 years old? Folks, these are the formative years of your brain. You're trying to learn how to read, how to write, how to utilize basic arithmetic. The last thing we need is to start implementing LGBT curriculum because now we have to make sure we're inclusive and kindergarten kids know about LGBT curriculum or practices or whether or not a kid should change his gender at the age of 7. It's madness. I don't know about you. I'm tired of it. And I'll tell you something. I'm the only one really talking about this in New Jersey media. And I'm willing to die on the hill for this, figuratively speaking. Because you know what? No one else is going to take a stand against this insanity. And this is the problem, folks, with people who are woke or people on the left or people who identify as that part of the political aisle. They're absolutist. There's no negotiating with these people. Either you believe in this or, hey, here comes the adjectives. Here comes the vitriol. Here comes the slander. Here comes the name calling. You know what, folks? You can't negotiate with these people. You can't barter with them. You can't sit down and try to have a dialogue with them because if you don't believe what they believe, forget about it. Oh, here comes again the backlash. And folks, my producers on other shows have gotten tons of hate mail thinking that I am a bigot, a homophobe. I'm none of those things. You know what I am, folks? I'm a truth teller. I tell you what you need to hear. I'm not going to hold your hand. I don't walk around pussyfooting about little topics trying to make sure that, I don't hurt anyone's feelings. That's not what I'm about, folks. You're grown-ass men and women. Start acting like it and stop acquiescing to this nonsense by the woke crowd, by the social justice clowns, by, again, the woke fools, by the compassion mongers and the alphabet army, because all they're doing, again, is contributing to the decline of Western civilization. You don't believe me? Folks, think about everything that the woke army or the woke group or the woke mob is trying to infiltrate. Our public schools, media, Hollywood, everything. They're trying to contaminate it with this toxicity of wokeness. I don't know about you. I'm going to keep standing up to it, folks, and I hope that you do too. And that's what I'm thinking about right now. In this week's edition of the 4-time award-winning podcast, Talking the Hudson, which you can listen to live every Wednesday at www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking the Hudson, was one of my regulars, TapInto Columnist out of Jersey City, and also the Dean of Hudson County Journalism, Al Sullivan. We spoke for over an hour on a multitude of different topics, both locally and statewide. And here are some highlights for your consideration. First and foremost, we talked about now Mayor Stephen Fulop in Jersey City has an opponent who filed all the necessary petitions and will be challenging him in the general election later this November. Let's hear what Al had to say about Mr. Spears and his chances against Mayor Fulop.
Let's start in Jersey City here. We did learn last week that Louis Spears made his run for the mayor's race official. Obviously, he emerged from City Hall with a box of petitions and a broad smile. It was reported last week on the Jersey City Times. Quote, he said, "I believe together we can make Jersey City a place where every family can live safely and have opportunities to thrive," as he stood on the steps of City Hall. Al, I'm not trying to be a buzzkill or put a damper on anybody, but is this a little too late to get in the race like this?
Yeah, well, usually for a November election, you're operating the previous December. That's, usually you start organizing and putting your ticket together sometime, at least making all of the preparations in December, January, February, so that by the summer you're already putting everything, pieces together. This has sort of been haphazard overall because you have no real united ticket. You have a lot of candidates coming out, and some of them are aligned and some are not. So the opposition seems to be a little scattered, and no doubt some of these candidates will hook on to him, as part of sort of an unofficial ticket, but it's not the same as all of the early discussions that you usually do about getting out the vote and who you approach and who's your vote, and fundraising. And all of that seems to be haphazard.
Al, I've done my homework on Louis, and I've reached out to his campaign. He should be coming on the podcast here soon, so I'm looking forward to the interview. It just seems, and I'm hearing this from a lot of people, and again, I'm not trying to put a damper on it, but we have to be realistic. It just seems like this is sort of like just a protest campaign of Mayor Fulop, who is seeking a third term that he has claimed is his last attempt at mayor in Jersey City. We'll see if he holds on to that pledge. But at the end of the day, I'm hearing from a lot of people. I think Louis is trying to just get some attention, some notoriety, and just hopefully maybe try to emphasize that there are pockets of the city that are still not happy with Stephen Fulop, even though, again, he's won his two races pretty convincingly.
Well, the first one was tougher. In other words, Healy was a tougher candidate. Yeah.
That's right. That's
right. But the last one was a total slaughter. Partly because the HCDO and the powers that be were not really supporting Massachusetts the way they did Healy. Now everything is in Fulop's camp. He has the HCDO. He's running with the chairperson of the HCDO. And Gigi's and him seem to be on good terms. So where does an opposition candidate go to get real support against one of the most powerful political machines in the state? It's going to be difficult. It is probably a protest vote. It's probably, this idea of not to allow Fulop to run without opposition, because there are issues that can be raised, and if he's a good candidate, he could be raising the issues that need to be raised that people don't have a voice for. And that would be a service to the community. And also, if you latch on to some of the council people, they may stand a better chance of winning if you are tied into them. So, there's Gadsden looks like he may be running. and there's other people, and some of them are pretty strong. The Ward F candidate, Gilmore, is a very strong candidate. He has the progressive vote, plus he has a strong African-American vote. So, this could be a way of helping the council people.
Without a doubt, we'll see whether or not the candidacy of Mr. Spears is just a protest vote against Stephen Fulop, who is seeking a third term as mayor in Hudson County's largest city. Secondly, we talked about the ongoing sort of fickleness and the sort of hostility that's existing between what I would argue is going to be the most interesting ward race in Jersey City, and that's in Ward E, between incumbent James Sullivan and Jersey City Chief Prosecutor Jake Hudson. Al Sullivan had a lot to say about what this race represents to Ward E in downtown Jersey City.
I still contend that Ward E is going to be probably the most competitive race. It's going to be the nastiest race. I think it's going to get fickle and chippy, and it's only June, and I think it's going to get a lot worse in the next few weeks. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and there's several big issues. One of them is the new SID, the new Special Improvement District on Exchange Place, which is getting blasted in a lot of ways as becoming an exclusive neighborhood for the wealthy. In other words, and a lot of people, because a lot of ethnic festivals had been taking place there, and a lot of people are scared that because Matt Calley and a bunch of the local big shots there seem to want to exclude other people from other neighborhoods from there, that becomes an issue. Right now you have Gene Daly and a few others who are raising that issue, but it could really reverberate as, again, a social justice issue. Is there a kind of these ethnic groups being excluded because you just built a new hotel and you have all of these very powerful people there? That's a legitimate battle, and I don't know if Hudnut wants to be on the wrong side of that. So, and that's been rumbling for about a year. So that's about to heat up. The whole idea of affordability for the old village part of downtown, the Grove Street and stuff, is going to become an issue. And who has an answer? I mean, the mayor and stuff have long. Hello? Okay. Hello?
I'm here, Al.
Okay, I heard something go buzz.
No.
So what do you call it? So the mayor has their policies for abatement in the past have largely driven up the price of rent and also the affordability. He's trying to make up for it now, but that's an issue that Solomon can run against the mayor and against Hudson. Plus, there's not a lot of good feeling between those two.
As always, it's a very informative episode with Al Sullivan. You can always check him out at tapinto.net via the Jersey City page, and also check out the episode in its entirety with me by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking to Hudson. You can download the episode and listen to it anywhere at any time from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet. So during these hot days, if you're going to stay indoors or even be under the shade, tune in and trust me, you won't be disappointed. And now some local stories for your consideration. And let's start off in Jersey City, and as discussed with Al Sullivan during the podcast, Mr. Louis Spears has now announced his run for mayor of Jersey City this past week, submitting all the necessary petitions and signatures to make sure he gets on the ballot this November. Now, a shout out to Aaron Morill, the editor-in-chief of the Jersey City Times, for his report on this story. Now, Louis Spears went on to say this past week, quote, "I believe together we can make Jersey City a place where every family can live safely and have opportunities to thrive." As Mr. Spears stood on the steps of City Hall, standing with his young son, Bo, in one arm, and his family crowded around him. Now, last month, various news outlets, which include the Hudson County View and also the Jersey City Times, reported that Spears had filed what's known as an A-1 form with the New Jersey Election Law Enforcement Commission. However, it wasn't until last week that Spears was ready to make an official announcement. Now, when asked what his top priorities would be in his campaign, if elected, Mr. Spears said, "We're developing a policy platform, and I'll have it to you in a couple of weeks." Now, to get on the November ballot, Spears needed to collect 1,680 signed petitions by August 30th. Now, Spears says he's ready for the challenge as he's going door to door, and he's going to let everyone know that he's here and he's ready to lead. Now, in taking on two-term incumbent Stephen Fulop, Louis Spears does indeed have his work cut out for him. The mayor has amassed an enormous war chest and has received key endorsements, including that of the Hudson County Democratic Black Caucus. Now, Louis Spears has been born and bred in Jersey City, and he's the founder of the Kismet of Kings, an organization dedicated to mentoring young men of color. Folks, this is something that I think we should all appreciate. We should always want competition in any election. And of course, I'm sure Stephen Fulop is a very calculated and very intelligent politician, and he probably knew this was coming. Not from Mr. Spears, but maybe from others, but that did not materialize. Nevertheless, though, Louis Spears is a guy who's very liked in the community. He is someone who's viewed as sort of an outsider, as he's working in sort of nonprofit work for some time. And in addition to that, he's been a guy that's made his rounds in different media circles within the state of New Jersey. But it remains to be seen whether or not he can galvanize enough of a vote to overcome the support that Mayor Stephen Fulop has. Not only is he running with the chairwoman of the Hudson County Democratic Organization, Amy DeGees, on his ticket as she is running for an at-large seat on the city council in Jersey City, but he's received the endorsement of the organization itself. And of course, other prominent elected officials, which include U.S. Representative Albio Ceres, as well as various other mayors throughout Hudson County. Now, surprisingly, and really it's something to keep an eye on for, U.S. Senator Robert Menendez has not sort of infused any influence in this race, as he has not endorsed Mayor Fulop as of yet. And he may never will. As we all know, there is an ongoing conflict between U.S. Senator Robert Menendez and Mayor Stephen Fulop going back years to what amounts to a lot of speculation going back to when the United States Senator was on trial with, again, the federal courts, and certainly as the case went into a hung jury, obviously the issue remains whether or not the senator will endorse him, but sounds to me that, again, that ongoing hostility and bad blood isn't going away anytime soon. But in the meantime, what Louis Spears will do to garner any endorsements and who will run on his ticket remains to be seen. Let's keep it in Jersey City as we're now talking about a recent court appearance by State Senator Sandra Cunningham. And once again, a shout out to Aaron Murrill from the Jersey City Times for his report on this story. Now, during a 15-minute arraignment last week, State Senator Cunningham entered a plea of not guilty to charges of driving while intoxicated and careless driving arising out of her March 4th arrest. Now, State Senator Cunningham had allegedly just sideswiped two vehicles while traveling westbound on Culver Avenue when she was stopped, subjected to a sobriety test, and ultimately arrested. As she tried to perform the sobriety test on the sidewalk, Cunningham was heard asking about Public Safety Director James Shea, an exchange captured on the officer's body cam. Now, Cunningham's attorney, Mike Rubis, waived Cunningham's appearance for purposes of the arraignment. Now, if a trial does indeed take place, Rubis indicated that he would want it to take place, quote, in person rather than via Zoom. As we all know, in 2006, Cunningham pleaded guilty to operating a vehicle under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Now, should that plea count as a prior conviction, Cunningham could face from 2 to 90 days in jail and a 1-year loss of her driver's license, among other penalties. Now, Bergen County Prosecutor Linda Schwager said that she has received limited information about the case. Folks, we don't know about the tox report. We've seen the body cam footage. And I don't know about you, it looks pretty incriminating. Now, I've had the chance to speak with State Senator Cunningham. She's been a regular on the podcast, and I consider her a friend. So I don't want to throw her under the bus, but when you look at the body cam footage, man, it looks really incriminating. And if you've ever seen anyone under the influence, perhaps, of a substance, that's what you would think is evident during the body cam footage. Now, why she was asking for Police Director Shea is another story. I mean, that's one of the things that kind of annoys people locally about politicians, that, you know, if they're caught in a sort of uncompromising situation, that they try to get out of it because of who their status is. And of course, that might rub some people the wrong way. But again, we'll see what happens in court. She's entitled to a fair trial. We'll see what her attorney has to say. But as we all know, a tox report has not yet been published. We don't know what was in her system. But she refused a sobriety test at the scene. And again, with the body cam footage, it looks really, really bad for State Senator Cunningham. We'll see what happens if this does indeed go to trial. But again, based on 2006, it shows that she's already had a problem with this. Whether or not this is a repeated history or whether or not she's a repeat offender, again, remains to be seen. But we'll keep you posted on this story in the weeks and months ahead because I'm sure she'll be under the microscope for the foreseeable future. Lastly, here's a story that should resonate with all of us as businesses hopefully are getting back to normal. As we know, New Jersey eventually will reopen fully, hopefully in the next few days. But in any event, folks, businesses are trying to get back to normal and trying to sort of get back to life after a year and a half of COVID restrictions here in the state of New Jersey. So a shout out to Terry West with the Jersey Journal for her report on this story. So apparently business is booming again in Hudson County, even if it's not really back to normal. While some stores and restaurants are seeing their best business since the pandemic started, many, intentionally or not, have not fully reopened. Some store managers all throughout Hudson County have reported that they're not sure when, if ever, they'll operate in the same manner as they did pre-COVID. Among customers and staff, for example, there's still a wariness about being close together and being maskless. And of course, staffing shortages is also sort of adding on to this problem because many people maybe are not ready to go back to work as still living on unemployment becomes and still is a very attractive endeavor for many New Jerseyans. Now, while being vaccinated has eased the minds of many, many are aware that COVID-19 is still present. And folks, again, obviously, listen, it remains to be seen what's going to happen with businesses because obviously pre-COVID, we know how much it was booming in Hudson County. We've seen many lifelong businesses close down forever because of COVID restrictions. Obviously, in the last week, we've learned about everything Anthony Fauci is now being scrutinized about, right? We've seen emails being published based on the Freedom of Information Act. And folks, I cringe at the thought that this is just the tip of the iceberg because I'm sure we're going to learn more things about Anthony Fauci. And as we all know, how wrong he was in a multitude of things. And in the meantime, he, along with blue state governors, did what? They killed economies, killed businesses, obviously contributed to the decline of mental health of so many, not just New Jerseyans, but Americans overall. So it remains to be seen exactly the toll this is taking on businesses and whether or not they'll ever really fully rebound. But again, here in Hudson County, whether it's restaurants, stores, or whatever, it's good to see people shopping again. Now, whether or not you're wearing masks and whether or not you should be vilified for wearing them or not wearing them, hey, that's a debate we can have. But right now, folks, it's something we should be happy about. The businesses are reopening, but it seems like it took a little bit too long based on Governor Murphy's discretion to open it the way it should have been, like it's been in other states, like in Florida and in Texas collectively. We'll see what happens. And that's our show for this week. To check out all the excellent programming brought to you by the leader in independent media right here in Hudson County, the Hudson Media Group, check out their websites, www.hmgtvshows.com and www.livestream.com/HMGTV. Of course, you can make sure to like them on Facebook and, of course, follow them on Instagram and Twitter. And remember to check out recent episodes of the 4-time award-winning podcast, Talking the Hudson, by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking the Hudson. It's the best podcast you'll listen to every single week concerning Hudson County politics, and it's only exclusively on Blog Talk Radio. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always talking politics right here with the Hudson Media Group. I am New Jersey's premier journalist and top 100 Latino via the Latino Spirit online magazine, Fernando Uribe, saying so long and thank you so much for watching.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.